The meeting will start in 1 minute. Thank you.
Chair, can I just say I keep getting messages from Amanda Hollyoak appearing on my screen that I can't remove. I'm not sure why they're appearing.
Oh,
Sort of blocking my view of what's going on. No ideas. Okay, don't worry. I'll see if I can sort it out myself. Thanks.
I'll see if I can remedy that, but it might have to be something that you do at your end.
Okay, I'm watching the clock on my screen. It's 10 seconds to go. Good morning. We're now starting the meeting of the Place Overview Committee. I'd like to thank everybody who's attending today. I'd also like to make an apology in case anything goes wrong. This is my first virtual meeting chairing. I have chaired meetings before, but not with technology. So if we start, I'd like to say good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview Committee. I am Councillor Joyce Barrow, Chair of the committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately ring the support telephone number they have already been supplied with. Everyone is requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak. Do not use it for anything else. As Chair, I will interpret the Council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of remote participation with advice from the monitoring officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interests they have in any of the items on the agenda. I will also ask everyone invited to speak during the meeting, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which is not included in the register of interests, and leave the meeting prior to the matter being discussed. I'll start with myself. I have no interest to declare. I'll now read out each member's name and ask them to confirm presence and confirm if they have any interests. Andy Boddington. Andy Boddington. We'll move on. Julian Dean.
Present and no interest to declare. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob Gittins.
Present and no interest, Chair.
Thank you. Paul Milner.
Present and no interests.
Thank you. Dan Morris. Dan, are you on mute? Dan?
Present and no interest.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Pam Mosley.
Present, no interests. Thank
Okay,
you.
we have apologies from William Parr, and Nick Bardsley is subbing. Do you have anything to declare, Nick? You're on mute, Nick. You're on mute.
Sorry, present and no interest to declare.
Okay, thank you. Paul Wynne.
Present and no interest to declare.
Thank you. Can I now check that the following portfolio holders, officers and guests have been able to join the meeting? Councillor Steve Davenport is trying to join the meeting. I will probably hear from him hopefully shortly.
Yes, I'm here, Joyce.
Oh, brilliant. That's super. Thank you, Steve. Steve, I don't know if I said he was portfolio holder or is portfolio holder for highways. Councillor Ruth Horton, who has submitted a member question.
Yes, present, Chair.
Thank you. I did invite Councillor William Butler, portfolio holder, to attend, but unfortunately he was unable to. Present for the agricultural vehicles item, is Mark Barrow with us today, or is he still on holiday, Director of Place?
I am here, Chair.
Oh, lovely, thank you. Steve Brown, Head of Environment and Transport.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Ian Kilby, Head of Planning Services.
Yes, I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Steve Smith, Assistant Director, Infrastructure.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Daniel Webb, Scrutiny Officer.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Sarah Townsend, Committee Officer and Minute Taker.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Andy Wild, Interim Head of Highways.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Mark Wooden, Developing Highways Area Manager, North and Central. Mark Wooden? Okay, we haven't got him. Karen Collier, Public Protection Leader.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. Thank you for stepping in last minute, Karen.
That's okay.
We also have guests, and the guests are Paul Brereton, who is a farmer from Market Drayton. Have you managed to get through to us?
Yes, and the name, yes, Chair, I have, and the name is Brereton.
Did I not say that properly?
No.
Brereton. Okay then, thank you very much, and thank you for correcting me. I'll just say Paul, I think, if I want you to speak, because I'm bound to get it wrong again. Mark Taylor from Yariel. Are you there, Mark?
Yes, I'm here. I'm present.
Yeah, it's Yariel UK Limited, and thank you very much for joining us.
Okay.
Robert Newbury, Regional Director of the NFU.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Chair.
Thomas Price, Farm Transport and Safety Policy Advisor for the NFU.
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Thank you. Rob Lake, Traffic Management Advisor, West Mercia Police.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Charity Pearce, Police and Crime Commissioner Assistant Policy Officer.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Good morning, Charity. PC Tim Viner, West Mercia Police.
Yes, good morning, I'm present.
Good morning, thank you. And Claire Featherstone.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay, I shall now turn to the items on the agenda. As already noted, Councillor William Parr has sent his apologies and Nick Barsley very kindly is submitting for him. Can the committee officer confirm if there are any other apologies or substitutions?
Yes, we do have apologies from Councillor Simon Harris. We haven't had a substitute advised to us though.
Okay, thank you very much. 2 is disclosable pecuniary interest, but we have dealt with this during the initial roll call of the meeting. We now move to item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. And I'd like to move the minutes of the Place Overview Committee meeting held on the 6th of March 2020 as circulated with the agenda papers be signed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please? Do I have a seconder?
Yes,
Sorry.
Chair. Rob, Councillor Rob Gittins here. I can.
Oh, thank you, Rob. I will now accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone else indicates differently. No, okay, we accept that then. Item 4, public question time. We have 3 public questions. I will read them out and ask officers to respond to each. The questions and responses provided will be added to the web page for this meeting. Question 1 from Peter Clare, member of Salatin and Gabowen Parish Council. Why does Shropshire Council continue to allow significant development adjacent to inadequate, poorly maintained and often dangerous single-track lanes, as in Hengoed, where the establishment of a large agricultural development has resulted in a rat run for large agricultural vehicles and even HGVs along a pony and trap lane involving two farms operating in tandem and under the same ownership control. I'd like to invite Ian Kilby to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is Ian Kilby, Head of Planning Services. Just by way of context, it's first perhaps important to say that not all development requires planning permission, and indeed there is much that can be undertaken in agricultural development that is permitted under the General Permitted Development Order. However, where a planning application is required, this is then assessed for compliance, having regard to local and national policy before a decision is reached. The process is informed by technical consultees, such as our Highways Development Control Officers, who will assess the highway and traffic impacts before making a recommendation to the planning officer, which will often include conditions necessary to make the development acceptable. This may require improvements to the access to a site, or routing for traffic, or even for off-site improvements such as passing places, where this is considered necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move to question 2, which is from Martin Latham, Hengoed Lanes Group. In the last 12 months, the lanes of Hengoed have been subject to a huge increase in the volume and weight of traffic due to the granting of planning permission to build an industrial dairy farm at Pentre Kendrick, in brackets accessed by a winding single track lane, and the granting of planning permission to build an agricultural contractors depot at Crown House, Salatin, which has resulted in 20 to 30 heavy tractors, including all kinds of heavy agricultural machinery, being transported, often at speed, along inadequate roads. It cannot be the responsibility of central government to pay for the repairs to the damage caused on these lanes. That would be a sticking plaster operation. The problem would still exist. Either the perpetrators of the damage pay for the repairs, or the weight and speed limits be reduced to protect these essential local transport links. I'd like to invite Steve Smith, Assistant Director, Infrastructure, to respond. And before you do, I would like to say congratulations on your new role within the Council and wish you well.
Thank you very much, Chair. In response to that question, the Council recognises the impact that the large agricultural equipment has on rural roads, and in particular that area. And I think the paper on the agenda of today's meeting will begin to explore how the Council can look at the impacts of those and better manage them in the future.
Is that your full response?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to question 3, which I believe is going to be answered by Steve Davenport, but I'm just checking, Steve, because you joined the meeting late and I wasn't aware if you were aware you were answering this.
Yes, it's from Janet.
It is, right.
Yes, I'll reply to this, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll read the question. Question 3 from Janet Cobb, Restoring Shropshire's Verges project. The cost to the Highways Department and by default to the citizens of Shropshire of road repairs is outstripping funding available, and potholes and flooding causing road damage have rapidly become headline news, as well as posing a serious safety issue. Would Shropshire Council consider splitting the highways contract and bringing the highways contract for country lanes back in-house to be managed locally? This would mean that verges, ditches and hedgerows could be seen as a continuous corridor for wildlife all across Shropshire, with contracts reflecting restoration and low maintenance and local ownership management and accountability. This could save the council substantial sums of money in the longer term by tapping into the wealth of volunteer time and expertise available in numerous villages, especially in South Shropshire, and collaborating with the many organisations currently already working on the ground to improve the environment, such as the National Trust, Shropshire Wildlife Trust, Shropshire Hills, AONB, Restoring Shropshire's Verges project, etc. If this proposal is accepted in principle, then a move to building and capitalising on the existing community wealth that abounds in Shropshire could be taken forward collaboratively with Shropshire Council, and further positive spin-offs could be brought to the table, engaging with tourism, farming and local food production and hospitality ventures. Steve Davenport, portfolio holder for Highways, to respond.
Before I put the response that's in front of me, I just want to say what a good job Janet Cobb is doing with her team. I have been to her meetings and I appreciate everything they're doing and will give them my full support. But the response is the poor state of the roads and the resultant potholes and flooding, particularly in rural areas, is a national problem, which has been recognised by the government and resulted in a significant increase in funding being made available to authorities this year. Shropshire has invested these additional funds in a comprehensive programme a programme of resurfacing, which will help protect 275 kilometres of rural carriageway. The equivalent of resurfacing the carriageway from Shrewsbury to Dover. You know, that's a massive achievement we've done in a couple of months and still doing. From further deterioration, the council are keen to ensure that we drive value from the budgets we have available and therefore are open to exploring opportunities for alternative delivery within the current contractual and financial constraints. That's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. We now move on to item 5, which is a member question. There's been one member question which has been received from Councillor Ruth Horton. I invite you, Ruth, to read your question.
Okay, I'll be with you.
Thank you, Chair. Ruth Houghton, Councillor for Bishop's Castle Division in South Shropshire. My question is, since the lockdown has eased across the country, we are experiencing large numbers of visitors to beauty spots in Shropshire by people who appear keen to enjoy and access our lovely countryside. Whilst visitors are very welcome and essential to our local economy, the impact, unfortunately, in some areas of the county has been tarnished by litter, damage to verges and paths, parking in field gateways preventing farmer access, and dogs off leads around livestock. How will Shropshire Council and partner agencies, including the NFU, National Trust, Natural England, Visit Shropshire and the AONB, among others, address these issues and enforce relevant legislation to reduce this adverse impact, and at the same time allocate a budget for a publicity and promotion campaign of the Countryside Code whilst also welcoming responsible tourists?
Thank you, Ruth. I'm going to invite Claire Featherstone to respond to that. She's the Culture, Leisure and Tourism Manager, but as we happen to have the NFU here as well, they may wish to respond as well after that. So Claire.
Thank you. Good morning. There's been an ongoing campaign on social media to help encourage responsible use of the countryside by visitors and to the adherence of the Countryside Code. Our Visitor Economy Officer is reviewing a range of online communication to monitor the promotion of visitor activity in Shropshire, and I would be happy to discuss this with Councillor Horton and consider how this could be enhanced. Whilst we understand the concerns and inconvenience caused to landowners, it's not clear how the issues might be addressed. The Countryside Code is advisory rather than statutory, and enforcement of many of the recommendations is not possible. The Rights of Way network must be accessible, and with 6,500 kilometres in Shropshire, which in a straight line would span the Atlantic from Shrewsbury to New York, policing is not practical. Laminated posters explaining the Countryside Code, such as one we can send round to you, or similar to the Country Landowner Association campaign, could be made available. Any ideas about other practical action that could be taken would be welcomed.
Thank you, Claire. Do the NFU wish to respond, as you were mentioned in the question?
Thank you. No, we'd like to do that. So to start with,
Can you say who you are, please?
Sorry, Robert Newbury, Regional Director for National Farmers Union.
Thank you.
We produce signage for our members to use on public footpaths, explaining potential risks and hazards, and also asking members of the public to keep to the paths and to enjoy the countryside responsibly, for instance, keeping dogs on leads. And we've had a huge uptake in members requesting those signs all around the country, but also in Shropshire. Because I think, you know, members, farmers, they recognise that there are more people enjoying the countryside, particularly during lockdown. We also communicate with the public via our various social media channels and via our public members who join our membership category called NFU Countryside, which is for people who live in the country but aren't farmers. And so through various networks and communications in the press, we put out press releases during lockdown. We've been communicating messages about responsibly using footpaths, and through our internal member communications, we also we send messages to our members about maintaining footpaths in the way that's required of landowners. So we've got quite an extensive communication network to hopefully allows the public to enjoy the footpaths responsibly and minimises or prevents damage to farmland and infrastructure on farms, which can be caused when people stray away from the footpaths or use gates and other things inappropriately.
May I ask, do you actually work with Shropshire Council officers at all?
I'm not sure. We potentially do. My colleague, my county advisor, we're between county advisors for Shropshire, and I know we talk to the council on a regular basis. We have regular liaisons, and issues around footpaths come up. So we do kind of talk about these issues. So we certainly do what we can to kind of coordinate and complement each other's work.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Ruth. If I can now move on to I would say the meat of the meeting. Item 6, agricultural vehicles on rural roads. There's been a lot of public interest in this item, and I personally would like to thank everyone who has contacted me regarding agricultural vehicles and damage to the countryside and heritage sites. It's been immense. I've had emails, letters of farmers, members of the public, so it's really engaged people. This is on the agenda because of these numerous complaints that have been made to me about damage to verges, highways, blocked drains, stones and mud in the road not being cleared up, and national heritage assets damaged. One concern is the size of farm vehicles, which are getting bigger and bigger to the point of blocking rural lanes and creating problems for local residents. A huge concern is the speed farm vehicles are being driven on the highway and drivers talking on mobile phones. What I have learned and found out is that some of the problems occur where there are agricultural contractors working for farmers. It's our responsibility as a council, I believe, to give peace of mind to the public and see how we can tackle these issues. Farming is the lifeblood of Shropshire, and in one way or another, it touches all of our lives. Make no mistake, farmers do a fantastic job and are a vital service to the community. This is not about any individual farm, but a genuine look at this issue to see what powers individual bodies have to address issues when they occur. Individual bodies have to address issues when they occur. We have to be sensible, and we need to give a voice to the public when they feel they have none. The public feel helpless to address the issues I've previously mentioned, and I know fellow councillors, despite their best efforts, have struggled to assist residents in their areas. I'd like to thank those individuals, parish councillors and councillors who contacted me from across the whole of the county. What I hope to establish from this meeting, at least, is a liaison group involving the police, the NFU and the council to meet, say, quarterly if necessary, to discuss problems and seek solutions, or twice yearly if that's needed. I've got a number of questions that I would like to ask, but I shall hang fire. And what I will do now is I'll ask Steve Smith, please, to introduce his report. But just before you do, could we have the slides that we have, Amanda, showing some of the issues on the lanes? You can see here the damage. I think this is actually in my area. You can see that the lane is quite narrow and it is just eroding into the verge. Can we have some more pictures, please? Here we go. More damage. And another one, please. Next one, please. You can see how the edge of the highway is eroding. And actually where it's going into the hedge at one point. Next one, please. There you are, damage to hedges. You see the bollards on the side of that wall has been hit. Next one, please. Next one. I've got a lot of these skid marks around my area, and actually since I've seen these photographs going around the county, you see more and more of them. Next one, please. Next. You can see there that the verge has been so badly damaged, it's actually back to the roots of the trees. Next one, please. This is Montford Bridge. It could be a better photograph. You can see that there are vehicles coming in the opposite direction. There just isn't enough room on this one. Next one. That's it. Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who sent those photographs, and they are hugely helpful. Right, Steve, if you'd like to introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair. As you referred to earlier, Shropshire is a very rural county and it's got a thriving agriculture industry within it, and therefore probably is impacted by this issue more than other authorities. Notwithstanding that, it is a national issue. Authorities across the country are facing this challenge as well. There's only been so much money put into highways, and it's fair to say that the rural road network has suffered across the country. Shropshire, though, is no different in terms of how much that's impacted on its rural network, and nationally about 16% of roads are considered to be in need of repair, and the repairs are typically those edge areas which are crumbling and beginning to fall away. But the roads do play a fundamental part in connecting the businesses, and we need to make sure that they are fit for purpose, but also make sure we're working with others to ensure that the damage to the roads is as minimal as possible. It's probably fair to say that a large majority of the vehicles that we're talking about have absolutely every right to be on the highway. They're within the weight limits and the width limits required of the highway, so therefore it's not that they're there by any means other than a right to be there. Sorry, I'm getting some freezing on my reports there, struggling to keep up and read what I've had for this. But it is recognised that locally for Shropshire that we do need to maintain our networks, and our asset management strategy identifies this challenge and states that there are concerns about the condition of some minor roads. The minor roads typically consist of little pavement structure, are at most at risk of rapid deterioration due to the ingress of water and overloading. And investment in these roads is more challenging to justify with other demands on more popular routes. However, these roads remain crucial links for our communities. As I said, as a rural authority, Shropshire has more of rural roads than most other highway authorities. 46% of our entire network is considered to be rural road. Funding for the council though is below average, and we get approximately £13.275 million a year, with an additional incentive grant of £2.765 million to reflect Shropshire Council's approach to good practice from government, and therefore in the region of about £16 million a year. And that equates to just £5,000 per kilometre per annum for maintaining our roads, which, as you'll appreciate, with a network in the region of 2,300 kilometres, is not a great deal of road that we can fix at any one year. And therefore the damage to the verges and to the sides of the road does become a burden to the council in order to be able to address this. Part of the other problem is much of the rural network are historic in nature, and often little more than older tracks that are just built up with overlaid tarmac on the original tracks, and tend to be quite narrow, about 5 metres in width. And as agricultural vehicles and indeed other goods vehicles have grown larger and wider, we are beginning to see more of this overrunning of verges in order to allow vehicles to pass on these highways. It's also fair to say that the verges themselves have crept into the highway as the maintenance of the verges has struggled to keep up as well. So it's a bit of a both on us maintaining the highway and verges in a fit state, and the impact that passing and going over the verges is having on the highway. This overrunning of the verges provides us with two issues, and paragraph 5.11 I've noticed is missing a bit at the end, so I'd just like to try and clarify the bit that's missing there. With the overrunning of the verges and the digging in, so that it's almost like a channel at the side, is meaning there's not sufficient strength at the edges of the carriageway to retain the carriageway in fit condition, and therefore we do have edges crumbling away. But equally importantly, quite often we have drainage channels moving through the verge so that water can get off the highway into the ditches on the roadside. And when vehicles are overrunning the verge, quite often these grass channels through the verge are damaged and reducing the ability of water to get off the highway. And water standing on the highway is one of the primary impacts of deterioration of the highway, and it's what tends to cause potholes. And therefore the damage to the verge is a very real issue of us being able to maintain the quality of the roads on the rural network. Notwithstanding that, we've sought to really invest in our rural network as much as we can over the last few years. And Councillor Davenport earlier referred to the huge undertaking we've just carried out on resurfacing of 275 kilometres of road, which primarily has been on more rural routes. And we've, on top of that, we've also enabled 90 kilometres of road to be upgraded through our normal programmes of work, above and beyond the additional funding that we received. We do, however, still have around 2,450 defects have happened on our rural road network in 2020, so there is still more investment required, and therefore all the more need to make sure that we're managing our roads so that water can run off, so that we can protect the edges and reduce the number of defects that are happening, because every defect is obviously a cost to the council to repair. We've also done a lot of significant work on our rural drainage, and I referred just now to the roadside ditches, which had in truth become overgrown, and we've done a lot of work in clearing some of those ditches to enable that water to run off more effectively, and therefore ensuring that those channels that carry the water from the carriageway to those ditches are clear as well is even more important, because we can take a lot more water off the road than perhaps we have done in the past. So we've been able to undertake 45 kilometres of ditch and culvert clearance just since April this year, so a significant undertaking on managing our rural routes. So one of the things that we could do from a council's perspective in trying to maintain this is look at programme of strengthening of that edges, and also perhaps strengthening of some of those what we call grips, so the channels through the verges, perhaps using a curbing mechanism to make sure that they don't get squashed by overrunning vehicles. But more importantly, making sure that we are working closely with colleagues in both the police and NFU to come to a way where we can manage it more effectively. Given my report froze ages ago, I think that's a reasonable recollection of what the report said. So, but my apologies for if it wasn't completely accurate.
Thank you very much. It was a very good report. I do think it didn't mention block drains, as I remember when I read it. What I intend to do, so members are aware, because I can see an awful lot of you wish to speak. What we're going to do is I'm going to go to the police for their comments on this first, then the NFU, then I'm going to ask Mr. I'm scared of saying this now because I'm going to say it wrong. I'm going to say Brereton again, and Mr. Taylor to provide their comments. So if we can do it in that order, and then we'll come to our committee members, if that's okay. Right, so police, would you like to comment on what's been said so far?
Tim, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
And please say who you are and what your job is. Thank you.
Right, I'm Rod Lake, Traffic Management Advisor for West Mercia Police. I'm obviously aware PC Viner is also present, but from my point of view, obviously, a police response to the issues that you've raised in regards to sort of mobile phone usage, speeding, etc. Obviously, the police will act accordingly within the sort of legislative framework within the Road Traffic Act. But what I would say, certainly for a lot of the issues that you've mentioned, education, awareness of the drivers and owners' responsibility is key here. Obviously, education that we would like to see foremost, but then obviously enforcement is also an option. I mean, we have various campaigns that we undertake in response to agricultural issues such as mud on the road, and we do have a policy in place where if we receive any reports of mud on the road, that officers are deployed to consider the danger, and removal of the hazard is considered a priority, which we would call out the Highways Authority. But under the Road Traffic Act, there is an opportunity to prosecute people if needs be. Obviously, we would like to come to a more amenable conclusion for those rather than prosecute people, so that's where the education point comes in. In terms of road traffic offences, we do run other I'm trying to think what it's called now, where people can send in mobile footage, and that will be looked at as to whether there is merits to prosecute people. Operation Snap it's called. So members of the public can, if there are obvious breaches of legislation, can send in footage to the police. We will look at it on an individual basis, and if necessary act on what is seen and whether or not it requires prosecution, or again we educate those people that are committing these offences to try and resolve that. Certainly, in terms of speed enforcement, we actively enforce certain rural roads within Shropshire, but as I say, the road network is quite extensive and resources don't permit us to be everywhere on every occasion, but we do where we have the evidence to suggest that there is an issue, and that's not just agricultural vehicles, but that will be every type of vehicle usage on rural roads. So we will when it becomes necessary, we will look at the legislation to enforce any breaches of the Road Traffic Acts throughout Shropshire. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm actually going to change the order that I'm actually letting people speak, and the reason being that I know Mr. Brereton has a number of issues and concerns, and I think actually I should have asked him to speak before you spoke, because I think he does highlight a few things that he has issues with regarding the police. So I'm going to change the order, and you may come back if you wish to respond to what he's saying. Okay. So if you'd like to speak now, Mr. Brereton, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Paul Brereton. I'd like to add that I'm a fully qualified agricultural engineer. I also run an agricultural machinery and repair business, and we have got large goods vehicles for haulage as well as in addition to that, I have a farm where I have a beef farm in North Shropshire. First and foremost, the maximum legal speed for an agricultural tractor is 40 kph, or the equivalent of 25 miles per hour. Most of these tractors are now being driven not only on rural roads, but on A and B roads at in excess of 50 kph. And at my calculations, that is 25% more than the legal limit. This has got to be stopped. The law says 40 kph, and these tractors are all doing in excess of that. Point number 2, the maximum weight, gross weight of any agricultural tractor-trailer combination is 31 tonne, with a maximum payload of only 14 tonnes. So if you want to break that down, a tractor approximately weighing 11 tonnes, a trailer approximately 6 tonnes, and the payload, a maximum of 14 tonnes, gives you 31 tonne. A lot of this equipment is running at far in excess of that weight. A 44 tonne, 6-axle articulated lorry puts a permissible load per axle on the public highway of 7,333 kilos. A 31-tonne 4-axle agricultural outfit puts a permissible payload per axle onto the road of 7,750 kilos. That is 5.7% extra axle load on our roads than a large goods vehicle. So either they've got to put more axles to reduce the ground pressure, or they've got to comply with these new rules. The lot of the problem relies with the agricultural kit has got bigger from agricultural contractors that are working for farmers. And these people are totally unaware of what damage and what concerns they're doing because of the young drivers they've got on them. A young driver can pass a tractor test at the age of 16, but his maximum gross weight must only be 24 tonnes. Most people, if they can get somebody to drive a tractor, as long as they've got a licence, they'll allow them to do it without actually looking into the rules and regs. Mobile phones are a major issue. All these modern day tractors have got Bluetooth telephone connection, and they should be using them. And that's all there is to it. But we all see people doing it. One of the other speakers spoke about vehicles being within the law of width. There is a lot of legislation to do with width. The maximum width is actually 3 metres, which is under 10 foot, which can be used legally on the road. We've then got up to 3.2 metres, which is movement on a public highway with notification, and anything 3.5 metres and over must have a police movement order. This is the law of the land, and it has not been implemented by West Mercia Police. Another thing that's a major issue on rural roads as well is these tractors with these large working lights on the front and the top of the cabs. It is against the law to use those lights, full stop, apart from working. They are working lights to be used on the land, not on a public highway. Front linkages on tractors with huge implements on the front at night time blank out the headlights of the tractor and the front marker lights positioned on the front of the cabs. That's why these drivers run with these spotlights on. They dazzle people, you can't see, it is dangerous. Telehandlers and loading shovels have got age restrictions, weight restrictions and speed restrictions on the road. They're not being adhered to. And this all brings a problem for all of us, both farmers, such as myself, and the NFU and its members must appreciate that they are employing these contractors to do these jobs, and the farmers themselves have got to get the work done, we know. But that still does not justify causing problems for other members of the community. And as a farmer and a member of the local community, we all need to work together. The police need to be far, far more proactive in stopping these people that are doing speeding, and if need be, prosecuting them. You'll only have to prosecute 1 or 2 with a speeding ticket. The word will soon get about and the problem will diminish overnight, because people don't like being hit in the pocket, and also they get points on the licence. The NFU must make its members aware that these things can't be tolerated in a modern day society. We all need to live and work together in these communities, and both the police and the NFU are not giving the right advice and seeing that it is adhered to with their membership. I hope I've been able to give you some highlight of weights and legislation and what is going on in the rural area.
Mr. Brereton, thank you very, very much. I think that is quite enlightening for all of us, members of the public who are listening. And I would be interested in the police response, though we are actually speaking to Steve's report. I think it's very important that these issues are dealt with by the people. I mean, there are big issues there, police-wise, that we are being told. So I think I need to come back. I do hope members will forgive me for giving the police the right to reply. Well, not for giving them the right to reply, but for holding back on their questions until we hear what everyone else says, because I think it will help us in our deliberations and any recommendations we may come forward with. So would you like to come back, please?
Tim Viner, if it's okay with Rod, I'll answer, if that's okay.
Yeah, you're probably better placed there.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to just say thank you to Paul. You know, he's raised some really valid points there. What I would say, if it's okay, is that he also needs to remember that he's in a very fortunate position to have the knowledge that he has. The reality is that the rest of, well, probably 99% of people who live in Shropshire are completely unaware of those things that he is talking about. The reality also is that the vast majority of police officers don't know quite a lot of that. And what I would ask is that people understand that police officers have to know the law in relation to everything. We're not just talking about tractors on the roads or cars on the roads, highway legislation. We're talking about everything in between, from Mars bar theft in Sainsbury's all the way through to murder. Police officers are required to know a lot of law, a lot of legislation, and the reality is that they can't know it all. It's just not possible. The big thing forensic prison investigator and working on the roads in a police role for the last 14 years, is that we need to educate. We need to educate the farming community. We need to educate the contracting community, and also the local community and the police as a whole. Rod mentioned in his response initially the dash cam footage options, so what we call Operation Snap, which has been a huge success so far for West Mercia Police, where people identify an offence being committed while they're driving in their car. They'll use their dash cam footage to send it into OpSnap, and some brilliant prosecutions have come off the back of that. There is nothing to stop that being used in relation to agricultural vehicles also. The reality is that we all know that policing has been hit quite hard by government spending caps and such like, and road policing is, although it is a priority, there's just not enough police officers to police the whole of Shropshire's roads all of the time. So we need to educate, we need to make people aware of what's occurring, and what they can and can't do. I'm yet to come across a contractor who employs a 16-year-old to drive vehicles beyond what they should be driving, and I speak from experience there as previously employed by a contractor. We have to give a lot of time, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. I do see what you're saying about the speeding offences, and if we hit a few, is it going to stop everyone? There's one way to find out, and we'll try. But the reality is that we all drive around in cars, all of which can go way above the speed limit, and quite regularly people do that. People continue to speed despite the fact that they know that they could be prosecuted for it. I'm not saying that makes it right. Please don't think that I am. The reality is that people will continue to drive in the manner that they do. We can do our very best to educate and to prosecute where it's appropriate. We need to reinforce with people what they should and shouldn't be doing. And that's education from my side, from the policing side, and also from the wider community. People like yourself, Paul, who have that knowledge. You know, if you're in a position to be able to pass that on to your customers, to your friends and colleagues, then as far as I'm concerned, that's absolutely brilliant. I hope that makes sense as a response. Thank you.
I mentioned at the beginning about a liaison group. I will mention that again at the end, and I think Mr. Beaton would be a good person to have on that with the other bodies that are involved in this. I'd like to ask the NFU for their comments on this matter. I think we've lost Steve's report somewhere, but the NFU would like to comment.
Thank you, Chair. So Robert Newbury again, NFU West Midlands Regional Director, and I'll ask my colleague Tom Price to speak after me as well. So to start with, thank you for what you said, Chair, about farming being the lifeblood of the county. The food and farming is the largest manufacturing sector in the country. It's £13.5 billion industry and is hugely important to the economy nationally, and particularly here in the county. There are some very large food businesses and some nationally significant farming businesses, and I think we need to remember that it is hugely important that those farmers and that supply chain can operate efficiently, and they're investing in modern productive infrastructure, and some of that we're going to see on the roads in the form of tractors and other agricultural equipment. I think we've also heard that the road infrastructure nationally is under a huge amount of pressure, and it is probably we see the impact of that pressure as damage to the road infrastructure. So I guess naturally in a rural county where there are more farm vehicle movements, we're going to see a proportion of that impact will be down to farm vehicle movements. So that's potentially a natural consequence. We've heard about types of activity which we maybe don't approve of. So I want to break down into kind of two areas. There's legal and legitimate activity where farmers and rural businesses are perfectly entitled to be on the road and going about their business. But we've also heard about some illegal and illegitimate activities. You know, for instance, using a mobile phone whilst driving a tractor on a road. And I think it's important we separate the two. I would say that illegal and illegitimate movements and activities are definitely in the minority. And as an NFU, we do all we can to communicate with our members about what the law is and the importance of operating within the law. And that's our members' own movements and also where they're using agricultural contractors. We regularly run farm safety events around the country and within the region. We have a call centre where members can access immediate technical advice on what they can and can't do when it comes to vehicle movements and their farms and road movements. We have business guides on our website so members can access detailed technical information to help them decide what they can and can't do on the roads. And also in our member meetings at a branch, county and regional level, we regularly cover issues such as farm safety and vehicle legal capacities and limits. So wherever we can, we're putting those messages across. But I think it is really important that anyone listening to this meeting and involved in this meeting is clear that legal and legitimate road movements of vehicles, isn't something we should be looking to discourage because the industry is so important. And also, where these vehicles are getting bigger, we are talking about less frequent movements. There's only so much produce to be moved from the field to the farm or vice versa. So we're potentially talking about less movements of bigger vehicles. Modern farm vehicles, yes, farmers are investing in modern infrastructure, and that involves the tractors as well. And generally speaking, the modern tractors come with more and more sophisticated, safety equipment. So better brakes, better suspension, and air brakes are fairly commonplace on modern tractors and trailer combinations. So farmers are and farm vehicle manufacturers are investing in making these vehicles safer. And I would say in general, my experience of the way our members use these vehicles is they do so in a very professional manner. We've heard a bit about contractors, and I'd hate for anyone to think that farmers using contractors are automatically causing more damage or acting in any way recklessly. I think we have to remember that contractors are highly skilled professional businesses, and 100% of their time is spent in the tractor cab. These guys, so they will be trained, they will be experienced, and they are generally using very up to date and modern and well maintained equipment for the very reasons we've described, but also so they can run very efficient businesses and provide an excellent service to their customers, the farmers. So, I hate to think anyone would take away from this that the use of contractors is in any way a negative thing. It's not. But also farmers who are doing their own work, again, they'll be focused on investing in the safest and the most efficient equipment to go about their work. I'm not going to go into some of the technical points raised. For instance, Mr. Brereton mentioned things about specific weights and speeds. I think if there's anything to pick up on that, I'll leave that to my colleague Tom Price. But that's what I'd like to say for now. As far as the working group's concerned, we'd be very happy to be involved in that. We'd be really keen to engage in that process and meet on a quarterly or biannual basis and contribute where we can and feed any information back to our members. And also, we saw some guidance that the council produced, which I think we recognise is fairly out of date. We'd be more than happy to be engaged in updating that and bring it in line with some of the guidance that we've seen from other counties like Cornwall and Cumbria. So keen to engage, keen to get any messages out to our members, but also keen that as a rural community, that the public, the council, the farmers, we all recognise that farm vehicle movement is legitimate. It is not a bad thing in itself. We need our farmers to be the most efficient in the country and the world, so that they can compete on a global stage in the future and produce more food more efficiently for the public. Because at the end of the day, producing food is a vital function that farmers perform, and we don't want to get in their way of doing that or make Shropshire County, which isn't farmer friendly. Tom, are you able to just chip in? Or is there anything I've missed I should have mentioned?
Yes, thank you, Rob. This is Tom Price. I'm the NFU Farm Safety and Farm Transport Policy Advisor. I think Rob has made some very pertinent comments, and I think one thing that I'd just like to emphasise is that there may be an issue around perception here. Agricultural vehicles are large, they are noticeable. So if you do encounter one in a rural setting, it's something which is going to be very visible. And if somebody is, for example, using a mobile phone, that is likely to be saved in your memory because of the nature of that encounter. To try and put things into perspective, agricultural vehicles are actually, in my opinion, very safe on roads. In 2018, there were approximately 230,000 vehicles involved in road accidents in the UK, and of those, approximately 500 were agricultural vehicles. And those figures, they make no apportionment as to blame in a particular accident. It's just saying that type of vehicle was involved in an accident. So in terms of road safety, I think perception rather than actuality might be something that we need to consider here. We do spend, as an organisation, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money in communicating to our members what the rules are, and what they need to do, not only just to comply with the law, but what is best practice as well. So I'd just like to emphasise the point that this is something which we do take very, very seriously, and try and encourage an awareness of issues and how to tackle those issues amongst our members. There are some specific points regarding the information that was supplied by Mr. Brereton. It can get very technical, and it might be more appropriate to pick up on those in the liaison group. But one example is that although the majority of tractors are limited to a speed of 40 kilometres, certain higher specification tractors are legally entitled to travel on road at up to speeds of 40 miles per hour. Most notably, that would be vehicles such as JCB Fast Tracks. So I think there is a need to make sure that the right technical information is supplied and made available, and that could be something which we take forward in the liaison group. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Taylor, you have been very patient. It's Mark Taylor, Yarial UK Limited. If you can explain who you are, if you'd like to speak, because you've heard issues mentioned which you can respond on. I'd be very grateful, and then I'll move on to members' questions. Thank you.
That's fine. Yeah, no, thank you. It's Mark Taylor. I'm Director of Farming for Yarial UK. We have farming businesses which are based both in Shropshire and Lincolnshire. Most pertinent is I have a farm in close proximity to Trevonham, which Councillor Barrow looks after. And I know she's had complaints about tractors in that area. What I just want to cover off first and foremost is just picking up on the contractor point. We, as a business, employ the uses of contractors, and part of that requirement is we do background checks on the contractors that we use to ensure that they have the correct insurance, the correct operating licenses, etc., to use those vehicles and machines that they use on the roads. Now, as far as I understand, and based on government legislation, the vehicles and machines that they use are not breaking any of those rules, although I'm told, you know, and it's coming back to what Mr. Price said from the NFU on the technical points. It is the technical points. Machines can go up to 40 miles an hour. I don't believe any of our machines go over 30 miles an hour that we use personally, and I don't think any of our contractors' machines go over 30 miles an hour. That's the first point. Now, I'm not an expert in this, and I would leave that to people who've got the knowledge to explain that further. But I think that is one point. In terms of movement, yes, we have got larger tractors on the roads. And if you go back 20 years, 22 years, when I first started a career in farming, Machinery then was a lot smaller. I agree with that, 8-ton trailers. But I would also argue that we were probably doing twice the number of movements of tractors on the roads at that point. And therefore, although we've got larger trailers and they do appear very much bigger, we've actually reduced the amount of movements on the roads. The other point is farming businesses as well. To be efficient, economic, to be the best that they can be in terms of competition globally, the businesses have got bigger as well. So farms have got bigger as a result. Therefore, the 50-cow dairy farm that the family would be running 20, 30 years ago and making a living off it just are not competitive anymore. If you look at those businesses, they are just not going to survive the current economic challenges that we have in farming. And as a business, we have developed into a larger farming business as a company. We have currently 3 dairies operational. We're hoping to get a 4th dairy operational in the next month or 2. And we're looking on developing a new site in Trevonnan for a new dairy there, which, you know, in effect, we have planning permission to do that. These farms will be run by professional managers. They will be run by people who are properly trained and are properly regulated by our core staff in the office. And these people will be operating based on the laws that are provided to us by the central government, and therefore it's not in our interest to be going and breaking those rules. We can't afford to be hindered by rule breakers, and our policy, just to let you know, we put in terms of inductions, people are given a health and safety induction in terms of use of tractors. They are trained. Each tractor has a sign in it which says no mobile phone use, and we have a zero tolerance policy to people caught having dangerous driving. And I don't personally condone the use of mobile phones at all. And I think, you know, that's a point that my number one bugbear is people using mobile phones while driving. And you can say it's tractor drivers. There's probably more people using telephones, handheld, and cars. But frankly, you know, to me, and I understand the resources of the police is limited, but I would like to see zero tolerance to that. What would be interesting to know is, of those 235,000 accidents on the road last year, how many of those can be attributed to the use of mobile phones? The other point I just want to bring out is a lot of these contractors do indeed use new machinery, which actually have air brakes, which are far better than the old-fashioned braking systems that they have. They also have air brakes on a lot of the trailers and the tankers that they're using, so they can actually almost, well, the brakes on those are almost as good as the lorries that are on the road, if not equally as good. I look at these older farms where I see old Massey Ferguson travelling up and down the road with a wonky load of silage bales on it, and I worry, and I note that the trailer has got no brakes on it at all. And to me, that's more of a dangerous item on the road than some of these modern contractors with bigger tractors and trailers who have been properly maintained and operated by professional drivers. I just think, you know, to suggest it's just the bigger tractors causing all the damage. I think the road network's been under pressure for many, many years. It's not just in the last, you know, 5, 10, 20 years. It's been a lot longer than that, and therefore the maintenance of these roads is probably needs more investment, which obviously costs more money, which is obviously short, but we need to take more accountability of that. The other point is the actual movement of traffic on the roads has gone up incredibly over the last 20, 30 years. I don't know how many cars are on the road now, but you know, you get onto any motorway now and it feels like you're on a car park because there's just so much traffic. I just think, you know, you can't just point the fingers at agricultural use for these minor roads. I think there's a lot more use of them, full stop, whether that be the Amazon delivery driver or just the school run. It is just as number of vehicles on the road, it's just we have too many vehicles on the road caused by the number of, in relation to the cost of repairs that we have. And you know, I'm no politician or anything, but it's a fairly straightforward answer. Unless you spend more money on the roads, the problem's not going to go away. Are we going to reduce the size of the tractors? I don't know whether that will happen, but that's again out of my hands. I can't control that. But we need to run efficiently run farms without the hindrance of causing other people grief or getting ourselves into grief, really. So I hope that gives you a bit of an overview of where we're coming from, really.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I just wonder whether one of the issues has been that when people do have issues, as you've mentioned, I wasn't going to mention that you were local to me.
That's right.
But I wasn't going to mention it because I don't want to identify farms as such where there have been issues. I wonder whether you are not getting the feedback from whoever it is about the issues and the problems. We had really bad blocked drains, stones, mud on the road for well over a week, which was reported. And I think maybe if they were reported to you, they would probably be dealt with really quickly. And I think at the end of this session, if there is any way with all these different organisations, the police, the NFU, that we can have a central contact number so that these issues can be dealt with quickly, because I am quite sure, Mr. Taylor, that you would deal with it quickly.
Yeah.
I know you had an issue with English Heritage in Offa's Dyke, and I know that you've come to a compromise with them. Not a compromise, you've actually been helpful to them, and I thank you for that. I'm going to move on to members now because they're going to be so bored sitting, well, not going to be bored listening, but they are just sitting there. So I've got a long list here. So if members would like to direct them at whichever participant of the meeting they wish, then they may do so. If I can start with Julian. Julian, I'm sorry, it was a long time ago you asked to speak, but if you'd like to speak now.
Actually, it was in response to the public question. So no, I don't want to speak on this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all the participants in the debate so far. My name's Dan Morris. I'm the Shropshire Council member for Burnell. Also, a fourth generation beef unit in Pulverbatch in South Shropshire. Agriculture is relatively very important for more important for our local authority than most other local authorities. Only Herefordshire and Cornwall have more people working in employment in agriculture than Shropshire. And also 2.3% of all vehicles on the road are other vehicles, so not agricultural vehicles. And there has been a 22% drop in use of rural roads by agricultural vehicles. I'd also point out that only 27% of Shropshire's roads are gritted on the road network, and generally we rely on farmers to grit and treat those roads during sort of bad times. And generally it is farmers that, you know, when there are accidents on the road or trees go down, it's farmers that generally you know, help that situation. Shropshire is a beautiful place to live. Many people quite rightly choose to live here, and people live in old agricultural buildings. So we as farmers have to accept that we've got more and more people that aren't involved in the agricultural industry that want to live in our beautiful area. It is great for leisure, but it's also a place that generates an income for many people. A farming business is no different to any other business in that it has to, in order to survive and develop and grow, it needs to invest and diversify and become more efficient. One way of being more efficient is using bigger and more efficient equipment. The upside of this is it takes more agricultural vehicles off the road, as the NFU numbers bear out. But the downside is that the bigger vehicles have more impact on the road, a bigger perception factor, and are scarier to go past when you're walking or cycling down a country road. There are times of the year when there are big concentration uses of the roads by tractors, silage time, maize harvest, wheat straw harvest. All those times, I think the overwhelming majority of people who live in the countryside understand and accept there is a limited window due to the weather to get the harvest in. Certainly when we're silaging, it's a 2-day affair. The weather has to be dry and therefore it's a day-night operation. At that time, my children don't go out onto the country roads riding bikes because it's a busy time. And I think people who live in the countryside, on the whole, understand and accept that. Where the industry could better help itself is during non-harvest times and being a little bit more thoughtful about using roads at non-rush hour traffic or school drop-off times. Big tractors driving past the school bus collection point in the village of Stapleton, for example, is a regular feature in my email inbox. In addition, and it is almost a cliche now and much discussed, is seeing people who drive tractors with mobile phones clasped to their ear. Couple that with the intimidating size of the vehicles, and I think this creates a disproportionately bad impression for the industry. As the NFU briefing points out, the majority of road fatalities occur on rural roads. It would be interesting to know what the stats are for accidents involving agri vehicles, attributed to agri vehicles. The NFU does some great work on behalf of the industry. We have a good local branch, of which my farming family are members. I would like to perhaps see the NFU be a little bit more proactive on the supply side with PR and advice to farmers, a push to make us farmers understand that being seen with one hand off the steering wheel pulling a fully laden grain trailer, or indeed a cattle lorry, is not a great look. We need to emphasise safety more. Farming is statistically one of the most dangerous industries to be involved with. Through the planning process, when farmers invest and develop, I'd like to see, where appropriate, farmers encouraged to make new private roads on their land, therefore diverting some of the pressure off our rural country roads that generally, that do get battered sometimes. It won't work in a lot of cases, but if it takes the tractors off the road of one stretch of road in the county that is continually damaged, that is a benefit to the taxpayer. Perhaps the local NFU could facilitate a Shropshire working group that meets with representatives of parish councils to get a better understanding of the current concerns that I and the 6 parish councils that I represent hear every time we meet. With regard to Shropshire Council and what we can do, it is slightly limited because agri vehicles are not plated as commercial vehicles, and so weight limits and time limits through our village don't impact. Where there are rural weight limits for commercial vehicles, LGVs are still allowed to use these roads to deliver to rural businesses. I think Shropshire Council has to look at the processes that slow up and prevent mitigation measures that PCs would like to see. Maybe it's me, but it just seems so incredibly hard to get things like white gates at village entrances outside, or quiet lane signs, or signs that say not suitable for large vehicles. The bureaucratic sludge we have to wade through just to get this sort of thing through sucks the life out of me and other PCs in Burnell. I'm sure it's the same elsewhere. Why is it so difficult? Finally, I'd like to say that let's not over-egg the issue of agricultural vehicles on the road. It is a perception problem because they're big. As the NF briefing scheme shows, it's only cars and white vans that are increasing on the roads, and it's agricultural vehicles that are actually decreasing. I actually think the bigger issue is LGVs and HGVs using our rural roads as rat runs and cut-throughs to save 5 minutes. One of those in my patch of Burnell is in Stapleton, just off the A49. I would at least like to see Shropshire Council grip this problem and use the signage to encourage large vehicles not to use the road, or even take enforcement action to stop commercial vehicles, as in the case that they did in Uffington. Mr. Joe Yap, who lives in Stapleton and a regular contributor to my email inbox, sent me this yesterday. Just for the record, 35 vehicles of 3.5 tonnes or more drove through the village before 7:30 when I left for work, majority being LGVs. From 8 AM is when the real heavy traffic kicks in. If we use limits on weights of commercial vehicles using these rural roads, this will reduce the pressure considerably on our road network, and I'm sure that will make a difference. Thank you, Chair. That's me done.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to have any response from other members, from any of the speakers? Are you happy to?
I'm happy. I mean, I think we should open it out to the. I'm happy to open it out to the members. There's nothing specific.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Steve Davenport now. Steve Davenport?
Yeah, I'm here. I do come at this from a farming background, and everybody's right here, actually, but it's how we put it right. For me, it's the photographs that you've shared, Joyce, Chair. What we need to be able to do via NFU, the police, insurance companies, is Shropshire Council can't be expected to repair these roads damaged by contractors and farmers. Somebody has to be held to account. As I put on the chat earlier on, we had a road closed for 3 months, the main A425 last year, because a trailer hit a barrier, and the year before that. So what we've got to start doing is holding these people to account, sending them a bill. We can't, as somebody mentioned earlier, tractors aren't going to get any smaller, I'm sure. But that aside, lanes aren't going to get any wider either. So it's got to be considerate drivers, trained drivers, and if they do damage the causeway around these lanes, and I live in Little Lanes in Weld Frankton, that's where I live. We've got some big contractors there, and it's as bad there as anywhere else. So it's actually holding these people to account. That's all I've got to say. And I'd like comment on that, actually, especially from the NFU.
Okay, NFU, would you like to comment?
Hi, yes, Tom Price from the NFU. Listening to the conversations this morning, I think potentially seems to me that it's a mixed issue. I think there was some comment from, I think it was Steve Smith, around the repair budget that was allocated to rural roads, but also I think there is very clearly, judging from the photographs that were shown, there is an issue with overriding verges. Now, I can't say whether or not each of those photographs was caused by an agricultural vehicle. It could well have been caused by an HGV or a van, or even a resident of the area. But at the same time, we cannot say that they weren't possibly caused by an agricultural vehicle. So I would say that there is scope for making sure that communications around the need to protect the verges is increased, and I'm confident that my colleague Rob would support that. And I think when it comes to making people responsible for damage that they cause, my understanding is that there are mechanisms already available to the council to do that, if they wish to pursue that. Thank you.
Okay, that's an interesting point, and one I think we need to look at. And I have got a load of questions later, and I think that is included about who actually pays for the damage that's done. I think you're being very protective about the pictures shown at the beginning. I can assure you, I know that the pictures that were taken in Chapel Lane, Trevonyn, were the result of tractors, without any shadow of a doubt. It's a small enough village to know these things and to actually know the people who took the photographs. So I do understand you being protective, and I would expect that. The next speaker, Nick Bardsley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I come back to the report briefly and paragraph 511 towards the end, where there is reference to what Shropshire Council can do at the moment. And I think it's important that we come back to that, because there are things Shropshire Council can do. I have in my electoral division the new abattoir built by ABP some years back, and a great deal of thought was given to that when the planning application was made, and subsequent negotiations for the Section 106 agreement, which resulted in a very comprehensive Section 106 agreement, a by and large very effective travel plan, routing plan, which takes all the traffic for the abattoir, both incoming and outcoming, away from the rural villages by and large to the south of the abattoir and onto the A5 by a fairly effective route, given that the abattoir is right in the middle of the North Shropshire countryside. There are occasional breaches of it, but both ABP themselves, local parish councillors, of course, are very quick to report breaches of the routing plan, and I think ABP has a fairly effective means of dealing with contractors who don't comply with it. Now, I think we should make more use of Section 106 agreements. I know that in the recent government white paper and publications, they're castigated as causing delays to the planning process. But the fact is that Section 106 agreements potentially allow improvements to highways away from the development site itself. Ian Kilby will correct me if I've got this wrong, so that where, as in my electoral area, you get a great deal of new housing, and a lot of the traffic generated by that new housing then has to go down little rural lanes to reach main roads, or in my case, into the north side of Shrewsbury. You could provide more passing places. You could look at routing plans. Passing places, it seems to me, is a remarkably inexpensive and actually very effective way of mitigating and, in fact, in some cases, eliminating damage to verges. Now, why don't we make more use of that when a builder is building new houses? The cost of providing a couple of passing places on a rural lane nearby really isn't very great in terms of the overall development cost. Why don't we do more of that so that the traffic generated from the new housing, when it's going along the rural lanes, have passing places? I know that sometimes it's attached as a condition to a planning permission. I'm sorry to say that those conditions aren't always complied with, and it seems, you know, Councillor Dan Morris has referred to the bureaucratic sludge. That's not a bad description for the difficulty in getting compliance with the construction of passing places. And I think there's more that Shropshire Council can do, Chair, within our existing powers. And yeah, of course, we need to look at these other things, but there's been a whole litany of issues raised over which, frankly, Shropshire Council has little or no control. Let's look at things that we can do now to provide better access, better facility for traffic to move. You know, passing places just seems to be such an obvious, simple thing to do at no great cost. And when you've got a new development, just require that passing places are provided. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is Mark Barrow and Ian Kilby still there?
I am, Chair. Mark, yes.
And I am also Chair, Ian.
Thank you. Picking up on the points that Nick Bardsley has raised, is there anything we can do in planning policy to actually incorporate some of the things there that Nick was saying, which are so obvious and so cheap? Or is there any way we can make passing places? I mean, that is something from numerous people who've contacted me, have brought up. Is there anything we can do?
Shall I respond first, Chair? It's Ian Kilby, Head of Planning Services.
Please. Thank you.
Just in general terms, the answer is yes, we can, and yes, we do. Councillor Bardsley references ABP and an effective solution to a problem. And there are other examples. Wild Bird Foods, for example, just outside Upton Magna, outside Shrewsbury, was required to construct a new access road that avoided the traffic having to pass through the roads within the village when that was built. So it can and does happen. I think a lot of it depends on the traffic generation by the specific uses. The cases that I've just referred to have high volumes of regular traffic, which might be different to seasonal periodic traffic associated with harvests or other agricultural activities. So just bear that in mind. But Councillor Bardsley does raise a valid point. That would be picked up by our, I think I referred to it in the answer to the question, the public question at the beginning, in response to the comments made by our technical consultees, our highways officers. If it's considered necessary to make a development acceptable in planning terms, then yes, it can be required and a section 106 drafted to that effect. And that would be a legal agreement, and it would be enforced to secure its compliance. But I don't think it's the case that you would say every farm building requires a routing plan. You know, you have to look at the traffic impacts, which is why I made that distinction between the ABP and wild bird foods compared with some other farming activities. So yes, there is a mechanism. Yes, it can be used, and it will be used. Thank you.
How does a member of the public trigger that?
A member of the public can trigger that by, I mean, this is where communities are quite useful, parish councils and residents in communities, because they have local knowledge. They have local knowledge, and the best way that they can articulate that is to let the planning officer know when an application is received, and to explain that in their comments. Very often, I think people responding to planning applications think they have to either support or object to it, and they don't. They can provide constructive advice or guidance to the planning officer to say, well, look, I know this road. That I think someone mentioned earlier in the discussion. I think there was the question, and the gentleman in Stapleton, and that Councillor Morris referring to the number of vehicles that passed his house before he left for work at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. That's really useful information to pass to a planning officer if you can explain what the local experience is about, you know, school drop-offs, when people are going and coming and so on, that may not be evident to a technical consultee looking at the highway network in isolation. So that's how the community can respond to that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nick. If I can move on to Paul Wynne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Paul Wynne, Priest Ward. My ward stretches from Whitchurch to Market Drain, basically. I also have been a dairy farmer for over 40 years. I've stopped dairy farming now, so I do know something about it. And our farm, the main road goes straight through it, so we know about silaging, mud on road, etc., etc. Most of the things have been covered now. Some great speakers. Paul Brayton stole my thunder, all his information I got written down here, but that's great. Well done, Paul. The speed limit is, yeah, on the main roads, we want the tractors to go faster so it doesn't hold up the traffic so much. But going back to the police, possibly the police finding tractor drivers who don't pull over in lay-bys. I travel the roads a lot, council meetings, etc. And they don't pull over. When I'm on a tractor, I still drive a tractor, I pull over straight away. If I see a lay-by, I'm in it. I can't quite understand it, and they ought to be prosecuted. Going back to, the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. I know, because I follow them, the big tractors now do 32, 35 miles an hour. And if they're going faster than that, they're a fast track, which you have to have a special licence for and pay road tax. So I believe the NFU might pick me up on that. But I think the biggest problem now is the big tractors in the small roads going through small villages. Mine's very rural, Mornsey, Adderley, Calverhall, all these small villages, and they go mad. They think the tractors are doing 60 miles an hour. What they don't understand, we have a vehicle trundling through a village. It seems like they're doing 60 miles an hour because they're so big. If you're on a push bike doing 30 miles an hour, it seems twice as fast if you're on a tractor. So trying to explain to them they're not doing 60 miles an hour, but they are doing 30 plus, which is quite a scary thing. These tractors are huge now, going back to when I first started with massive 35s, etc. So I think the police ought to pick up and fine. An example on the smaller B roads going through villages, pick these tractors up, fine one or two, including contractors, pull them up because they've got to go slower through the villages. And going down these small lanes, they've got to be careful. You meet something, they can't stop on a button. They really can't. If you've got 31 tons, air brakes or not, you cannot stop those damn things that quickly. But I think most things have been said, some very good points from Mark Taylor, Dan, fellow councillor, etc. But yeah, most stuff's been said, but it is a very interesting subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, Mark Barrow, did I cut you off before? Was there something you wanted to say? Mark Barrow is Director of Place. Was there something you wanted to say, Mark?
Not specifically. Joyce, I think Ian covered the planning bit really well. When you get to the end and there's a summary of kind of actions, maybe bring me in, then I've got some thoughts there.
With pleasure. Yes, thank you very much. Robert Newbury from the NFU, you did ask to speak ages ago, and I think probably what you wanted to speak to has gone now, but do you still wish to speak?
Yes, if I could.
Yes,
Chair.
please. Yes.
So I mean, my colleague Tom picked up the technical points earlier, but it was really about the planning applications and Section 106 agreements. I think it felt like that conversation was about where farm developments are happening and perhaps something can be done about lay-bys. But I think it's really important that we also look at this through the lens of if this is potentially a busy farming area, that we view any housing developments or other developments in that context. What impact will it have on these people? So if you're putting lots of houses in a village or near in a rural area where we know there are regular farm movements because it's a busy farming area, then perhaps it should be the housing development that needs to put in passing places in order to keep those cars safe, rather than necessarily the farm. I mean, I'm not saying it's just that way around, but I think it should be viewed from both perspectives. That the default shouldn't be that the farm vehicles are causing the problem. If there's a lot of urban type traffic because the villages are growing, there are more houses in the villages, and that's going to impact on both those new residents and the farmers. Then before accepting such planning applications for more houses in rural areas where people might not like what's happening on the farm over the hedge, that we consider actually maybe that there shouldn't be more houses there, or if there are, then the roads are beefed up to allow that to happen within the context of this is a busy farming area where there will be regular agricultural vehicle movements.
Thank you. I think that was what Nick Bardsley was saying actually, about housing, whenever there's any building that goes on, whether it be farm or housing, that should happen. So thank you very much for that. We've now got Andy Boddington. I'm glad you were able to join us, Andy, and you got that from Nuneaton. Would you like to speak?
Well, I think I'm still routed through Nuneaton due to server problems, but that's okay in modern life. So I apologise for missing the beginning of the meeting, and I may have missed something during public questions. However, my concern, particularly in the Ludlow area, is the destruction of biodiversity on the roadsides. This is not just tractors, I have to say. The closure of the A49 overnight here, which has been going on for weeks and has still got a couple of weeks to go, is leading to a lot of diversion of traffic overnight. And we're eroding our verges. And in an area where we have a lot of farm fields, the verges are corridors of wildlife and of biodiversity, and they really are rather rich. Although at the moment, I have to say, they're really rather broken. Sort of echoing in some places the photographs you were showing earlier, Joyce. And although I say that's not entirely agricultural vehicles, it's other HGVs on unauthorised diversions. So I'd like to put in a plea that when we look at highways and the impact on highways and on verges, that we think about biodiversity, and this of course links to the next paper on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. I'm very glad you made it back. Rob Gittins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Rob Gittins. I represent the Cheswardine division, which is a very rural division, very similar, I suppose, to Paul Wynne's and Councillor Morris's division. I get very often quite a few emails coming into my inbox surrounding, for example, speed of which tractors are coming down these small country lanes, ripping up verges, tractor drivers on mobile phones, all very large problems in our rural communities. And I'm just wondering whether there's something more we can do around the education side. I know one of our parish councils, Sutton upon Tyne, I think we did a piece of work with Shropshire Young Farmers, and we asked Shropshire Young Farmers as to whether they would put things out through their network, just to see if we could get some of these tractor drivers just to slow down and just take a little more care on the road. But not only young farmers, we've got I believe we've got several agricultural colleges in the county as well, and whether there's more we can do around that, and more, perhaps a bit more, the police and the NFU can do. Basically a around that group there. Also, just picking up on a point that Steve Smith mentioned around obviously our roads now having a lot more water on them. We're experiencing much more flash flooding. Is there a way really farmers could help in that, in helping to retain more water on the land, whether that is through some form of tree planting, better dug ditches, etc. So whether there's a bit more that could be done around there. And very lastly, I mean, should we not be working much more closely with the manufacturers farm equipment to perhaps put speed restrictions on the tractors, so they can't sort of go as fast as they should do, or could manufacturers be doing more from the education front to try to educate the users to make sure they're buying the correct machinery, and that they use the correct machinery correctly, really. So those are just some of the points that I just wanted to make there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've got Steve Brown and Steve Smith who want to speak. Do you still want to speak, gentlemen?
Chair, sorry to cut in, Tim Viner. I just wondered if I might be able to respond to him. I've got no way of sort of saying I needed to speak, that's all, sorry.
Yes, you can speak if you want to. Can you say who you are for the public?
From the police.
Yes.
Just in relation to what we spoke there about education for younger farmers and such like. Strangely enough, I had a conversation yesterday with my sergeant. We currently do a presentation to Fire Brigade on how we want them to do certain things at Craftsons and so on and so forth. And I discussed with my sergeant yesterday, perhaps putting something together that I could go out and give to the farming community, whether it be through Walford College or Harper Adams or through the Young Farmers Society, which I am very happy to do, and whether this is something we can bring into that learning group in the future.
That would be excellent. That sounds like a very, very good idea. Thank you very much. So, Steve Smith, you still wish to speak in response to the statements about increased weights? Yes, having resulted in less journeys. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It was mentioned by a couple of speakers about the increase in weights and size of vehicles has resulted in less vehicles on the network, and I totally support that. But there seems to be an assumption that two smaller vehicles are the equivalent burden on the highway as a combined vehicle of equal weight. Paul Brereton mentioned earlier and gave some info on the axle weights of some of these vehicles, and referring to 7,300 kilograms for HGVs, and for some of the 31-ton tractors, 7,750 kilograms. But for the purposes of the impact on highways, an assumption is made that for every HGV, it has the equivalent impact of 10,000 cars, and therefore it's not directly proportional, the impact. So as vehicles are getting larger, they have an indirectly proportional impact on the highway. And as I said in my report, a lot of these rural networks are really no more than old tracks that have been surfaced over and therefore not designed for that. there was also mentioned earlier that a lot of this is down to making sure that the road network is able to support some of these vehicles, but funds not being appropriate for us to be able to bring all of our rural road network up to support these vehicles. And therefore, what I would suggest is that, taking on board your suggestion of a liaison meeting, that we work more closely with the NFU and the agricultural sector in informing our highway asset management plan, so that we are improving those routes or maintaining those routes in a way that are more appropriate to the vehicles that are using them, and identifying where the main issues are to ensure that we are targeting our approaches, and perhaps taking on board the point of introducing passing places to prevent some of this verge overrun in a select area of a rural road network, rather than trying to address the whole of the rural road network. And that's just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we've got Steve Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. It was really just to sort of pick up on the points that have been made, which all seem to be coalescing around an emerging strategy of what we do collectively as the council, with the police, with the NFU, and with education, because the answer to there with all those key players and actors is to me that emerging plan, strategy, communications, and each organisation taking responsibility. And perhaps that's an area where we should do a bit of exploring and getting some outcomes determined.
Okay, thank you very much. I've just got one more speaker, which is Dan. I have got some questions, but I'll see how we go. Dan.
Just one very, very quick question. One of the police representatives that were speaking were talking about Operation Snap or Operation Snatch. I have heard of this before, but I haven't heard of it being used in Shropshire too much. I just wondered if the police could elaborate on that, or if it's if we're out of time, perhaps something could be circulated amongst members about that, so it could be promoted through the parish councils.
Excellent idea. I'm sure that's being noted, and hopefully we can act on that. I am aware that it's 10 to 12. I have got some questions, but what I want to ask is, would members like to have a comfort break for 10 minutes at 12 o'clock? Yes or no, or do you want to keep going?
Happy to keep going for me.
Yeah? Is everybody happy to keep going?
Yeah.
If I hear nothing, I'll assume it's okay.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. I'm just trying to find out how I raise my hand to speak. I am.
Well, you don't. No chat on the side, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm happy, Chair. Paul Wynne.
You're all happy with that? Sorry, Paul. Yes.
It's only a quick one. May I ask, perhaps, obviously it's good that this has been brought to the attention of the committee, because it's obviously a big issue by the sounds of it. But perhaps we could add this perhaps to a future agenda. So after the liaison group's been set up, we can bring that back and feed it back to the committee. It was only a quick question.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to take it that people want to keep going, and if you need a comfort break, I'll turn your screen off, go quickly and come back. We'll head on with this. I'm going to scattergun some questions I have for several different people there, and if you can give succinct answers to the questions I throw out there, I'd be very grateful, and then we'll go to recommendations. My first one's for highways. And are agricultural vehicles subject to the same restrictions as other motor vehicles with regard to vehicle size, weight, and who is able to drive them? Well, I think we've already answered that, so I shall ignore that one. What are the council's powers to deal with complaints about damage caused by vehicles? Do we have any power? Can we do anything? What cost is there to the council for clearing drains as a result of farm activity and tyres not being cleaned before the vehicles leave farms, which is in the Code of Practice? And if I can just mention, Shropshire Council's Code of Practice is totally out of date. It is the old County Council Code of Practice and desperately needs to be updated. All members would have had in their package of papers one from Cumbria Code of Practice, and one from Cornwall. I think the Cornwall one is excellent. Ours is so out of date, it's got wrong phone numbers and contacts, so could we please update that? In my own area, drains were totally blocked by mud from tractors, which caused a lot of flooding during wet weather, with the knock-on effect of damaging the highway through erosion. It didn't help that actually a pipe was put from one field into one of the council's drains, which is illegal, I believe. How do members, this is all about members of the public, how do members of the public register complaints with us to get issues dealt with speedily? Can the council put restrictions on lanes, as in weights, and can it be enforced? I'd be very pleased to have an answer to that one. Where national heritage sites such as Offa's Dyke and Trevonyn are damaged by farm vehicles, what can the public access, or what can the public do to access officers immediately to stop further damage? Do we as a council and responsible body have a liaison group with the police already and the NFU to discuss these issues and seek best practice? If not, I will again ask the bodies if they are willing to set up such a group. Questions for the police. What is the legislation governing these vehicles? I think we've already touched on that, so we'll ignore that one. Vehicles over 13 feet should have a police escort when travelling. How many requests have the police had for this in the last year? How are the police monitoring farm vehicles? Are they doing any monitoring? How many complaints have the police received in the last year about farming vehicles? What powers do they have, and have they actually used them? Have any fines been issued by the police? How do members of the public report a complaint with the police? Are there or can there be restrictions on times the vehicles can use the highways? I'm thinking of tractors in particular. Should we treat this issue as an act of antisocial behaviour? Should we tackle issues through community protection orders? Is there a failure of the local authority and police to work together to tackle this issue? I'm sorry, I know I'm throwing a lot at you. The other question, I think there is an important question about whether this is antisocial behaviour, you know, the way some of the roads are being left. I'm getting a message off my my Daniel Webb saying that I'm throwing a lot of questions at everybody. I know I am, but I think some of those are important. I think the failure with all the organisations is for members of the public to be able to contact them quickly when there is an issue. Thank you. I don't know who'd like to speak next. Shall we go to the police? And as I say, as succinct as possible, please. Thank you.
Rod Lake, Traffic Management Advisor. Yeah, there was a lot of things there aimed at West Mercia Police. Just quickly, Reoperation Snap that somebody just mentioned, it is well publicised on the internet, as Facebook and everything. It tells you exactly how you can go about reporting incidences, which I would encourage people to do, and that can be looked at on an individual basis, and if the merits are there to prosecute people, not just I'm not just talking about agricultural usage, but just generally, then we will do so. As with everything that members of the public want to report, they can ring the normal police contact numbers, and it'll be reported and evaluated and be looked at and put out to whichever department is deemed appropriate. I'm just trying to think of the other issues there.
I know, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry I bombarded you there.
I'm obviously in Shropshire we have the operational police unit, which is based at Shrewsbury, and they target traffic related issues. If they're made aware of a particular issue, it could be highlighted to those, and that can be looked at. I don't have facts and figures at my hand exactly with regards to prosecutions and everything like that, but I'm sure there has been some over the period of time, but exactly what I don't know, whether it's in relation to mobile phone usage, speeding, etc. Certainly if a tractor was seen to be going through a speed camera, etc., exceeding 30 miles an hour, for example, then they would be dealt with just the same way as a member of the public like you and I in our car. So that is dealt with in that way. Tim, I don't know if I've missed anything that you might be able to elaborate on.
No, I don't think so, Rod. Tim Viner. I think the only thing to mention really on the reporting front, everyone uses the internet these days. You can report crimes and any kind of traffic concerns via the West Mercia website as well. As Rod said, OpSnap is heavily publicised. If you just literally type OpSnap into Google, West Mercia, it will come up. And I'd like to say, getting this right, and I for one am more than happy to kind of sort of sit in control in terms of that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I know Ian Kilby wants to speak on the historic environment. If you just respond to that, and I should mention Daniel Webb did get a statement from English Heritage. If you'd like to read that out, and then we will definitely go after Ian and after you, Daniel, we will definitely go to recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll go to Ian first, Ian Kilby.
My apologies.
Thank you, Chair. It's Ian Kilby, Head of Planning Services. I think, Chair, you did respond to the Office Dyke point in your opening comments, but to answer the question about who do you contact, the Council's officers, Historic Environment team can be contacted via the general number, which is 0345 678 9000, or via email at historic.environment@shropshire.gov.uk. In terms of Office Dyke, that's an asset that's managed, as you've referred to, Chair, by Historic England, but we've got very good relationships with their officers there, and so we're happy to receive comments. Even if it isn't our asset, we can connect people with the appropriate people responsible if there is damage to that. And very briefly, Councillor Boddington, who's also on this meeting, will be familiar with damage to historic assets, because we had the damage to the Buttercross in Ludlow, and it realised hit by a vehicle, and that mobilised a number of officers on this call. So there is the point being that we will speak to one another and deploy resources as appropriate when inquiries are received by the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. If we move to Daniel. Daniel, would you like to read the statement from English Heritage, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just bear with me 1 moment.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting Historic England to the meeting of Shropshire Council's Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Unfortunately, we're not able to attend in person, but we hope this statement is of assistance to members in providing an initial overview from our perspective as government's advisors on the historic environment in England. With nearly 7,000 listed buildings, over 430 scheduled monuments, over 30 registered parks and gardens, and 2 World Heritage Sites in Shropshire, there are inevitably going to be some cases of friction between land management, including the movement of agricultural vehicles between land holdings, and the conservation of the historic environment. That said, incidents of substantial damage to nationally important heritage assets by agricultural vehicles appear to be rare, especially considering the number of movements they make, my apologies, which is testament to the care taken by the majority of the farming community. The most common form of damage is that to vehicles, all types, striking the county's many protected bridges. The impacts of repeated strikes to parapets are serious and presents a challenge both in terms of repair costs to your authority and in maintaining rebuild quality in what are often time-pressured circumstances with the highway closed. We are extremely pleased to have recently entered into a heritage partnership agreement with Shropshire Council's Highways Department to ensure an efficient system of repairs following any accidental damage and a programme of routine maintenance. Further proactive and preventative measures the Council could consider include weight and width restrictions on some bridges and also on minor roads that cut through earthwork monuments. The installation of barriers in the form of crushed barriers, bollards or bespoke solutions to enable a sense of place to be maintained, and the straightening of roads so that vehicles do not approach the historic asset on a bend have also been shown to reduce accidental damage. These solutions would all have to be accessed on a case-by-case basis, as there is not always an alternative route to gain access to particular land parcels or enough room to install barriers, etc. Historic England would welcome discussions about any particular heritage assets which the committee have concerns over, so that a bespoke solution can be reached. That's all.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, I think now we should move to recommendations. Do any members want to put any recommendations forward going forward from this meeting? Have we got any recommendations?
Hi, Joyce, it's Dan.
Yes, Dan.
I would like to see some kind of liaison group that, you know, to the format that you've already mentioned at the start of the meeting, and that, you know, I would support that, involving the NFU, perhaps involving talking to, you know, where possible, rural parish council meetings as well, to involve those, because that's where we get the majority of the feedback and the traffic. So I would support and, you know, and be involved in something like that if appropriate.
Okay. Can I ask if there are any other recommendations? Mark, would you like to, Mark Barrow, Director of Place, would you like to come in? You've been listening and
yes,
good ideas.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. I wonder if we could prevail upon NFU colleagues to issue some kind of advice note, if that makes sense, that kind of really highlighted this conversation, brought to the fore some of those issues about speed that Mr. Burton kind of raised. There's that thing about local stewardship and damage. I mean, actually, if damage has been caused to hedgerows, I mean, you know, many of our farmers are really quite responsible in terms of stewardship and looking after their neighbourhoods. Is there something about voluntarily, you know, if damage has been caused by a contractor accidentally, could some kind of scheme be put in place where they themselves kind of, you know, repair it? But some kind of advice note from the NFU, I think, could be something helpful. And there's a second one for me about the planning system, building on what Ian was said. That maybe we can start a conversation. We've got these things called place plans, and in our rural areas where this is an issue, if they can start flagging the priorities in their place plans for passing points or signage and the sort of things that Nick Bardsley was talking about, then maybe some resources like SIL could help support, you know, maybe the development of some of those. And then I'd just like to kind of welcome the police's offer of kind of some form of engagement program, whether it's with Young Farmers, NFU, those kind of things. So if they're helpful pointers, Chair, they were my three main ones.
Okay, thank you. Who would, if we do set up a liaison group, I'm assuming we have, everyone has said they would be happy to do it, the NFU, the police, ourselves. Who would be the organiser? Who would bring these people together? And not just that, as I say, one of the critical things to me about this is that people actually have someone that they can hold responsible, that they can contact and get something done and get a response. At the moment, people are going to different people and it's just not resonating. So is there any way of getting a central number from this liaison group even that can assist? Is there any way of doing that?
Joyce, could I pick up on that point, please?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Steve Brown.
Thank you.
You've got your title, Steve, haven't you?
Yes, I'm head of transport and environment for Shropshire Council.
Okay.
So essentially, because of the the liaison group, I think that probably Shropshire Council could do the admin for that and act as chair for that. You know, there is an impact on the highways, as you know, we've discussed through and I identified, and bringing all of the partners together, the picking up on the actions that Mark Barrow had just articulated, but also looking at, you know, some of the other issues in a bit deeper and pulling together you know, a plan or an action plan or a way forward on that. Probably would be, you know, in the councils and everybody's wider interest. So for the sake of organising the meeting, for the sake of that being chaired by us, and for the sake of moving this agenda forward, which is in all of our benefits, then, you know, I'd be happy to look at that and lead if that was an agreed way forward.
Okay, and we'll take that as a recommendation. I don't know if you want to come up with the wording on that one, Daniel, and we can take a vote on that. But is there anything else that members feel should be in those recommendations? I see Nick Bardsley said he would be interested in serving on the proposed liaison group, and I think Mr. I keep saying his name wrong, Burton, should be part of that as well. Because he obviously knows what he's talking about. Are the police happy to go ahead with this liaison group before we make that recommendation?
Yeah, Rod Lake, West Mercia Police. Yeah, we can, if you send something through, we can send a representative, whether it's myself or somebody from the traffic department over at Shrewsbury. We can certainly attend one of those meetings.
That's great. And the NFU, are you happy to go ahead with that?
Yeah, we are, Chair. Happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, in that case, what I'll do is I'll go to Daniel. Have you got any wording for us, Daniel?
Well, I suggest then perhaps we keep it quite simple and that you propose that Shropshire Council set up a liaison group to consider matters regarding agricultural vehicles and rural roads. Okay, and also I'd like somewhere in that there is a contact for members of the public if they have issues. If that could come out of the liaison group, that would be good. I'll take a vote on that if I may. So if I read out the names of the committee, can you say if you're for that recommendation? Andy Boddington. Andy Boddington.
For.
Oh, thank you. Julian Dean.
Yeah, for.
Rob Gittins.
Sorry, for.
Rob Gittins, yeah. Paul Milner. Oh, there you are. There's an entrance. Dan Morris.
For.
Pam Mosley.
For.
Nick Bardsley.
For.
Paul Wynne.
For.
And I'm for as well, so that recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. I'd just like to thank everyone who's taken part in this today. It's been a longish meeting. I think we have moved forward, and I think the public do know that we are actually listening to their concerns and that we all actually care very much about farming in the county. Thank you very much indeed. We will move on to the next item, and if everybody wants to disappear unless they're interested in the next one, they can do. Thank you very much. So we're now going to go to item 7, biodiversity. I just want to check Karen Collier is here and Sue Swales, ecologist.
Yes, I'm here, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Well, I like that bit of music, that was rather nice. Okay. Karen Collier, can you introduce yourself and say what your job is and present this item, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Karen Collier, Regulatory Services Operations Manager. The report provides an overview of the technical and strategic ecological support that the team provides across Shropshire Council. Partnership working is very much key to what we do, whether that's for planning consultations and pre-app advice or planning appeals, or for the development of things like the green infrastructure strategy or habitats regulations assessments for the local plan, as well as working with a wide range of internal and external partners. Future challenges are highlighted in the report, and that includes the impacts of the Environment Bill, which places further legal duties to protect and enhance biodiversity. So I'm accompanied by with Sue Swales, who's our ecological lead in the team, and both of us would be happy to answer any questions you've got, or if there's anything you'd like more detail on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members? Can you indicate it in the chat function, please? Yes, Julian, go ahead, please.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the report. It's just a few sort of discussing questions, really. The first is when are we going to see the green infrastructure strategy? Because I believe that's sort of commissioned, but it doesn't say anything in the report about when we'll see that. Then the second one is really is in terms of as members and hopefully staff will know, we've now got a new climate action partnership which Shropshire Council and Telford Council and various other organisations are involved in, and a big part of the story is going to be natural carbon capture solutions, and I'm wondering how far the team is involved in that, and whether we're mapping the opportunities for carbon capture solutions. And I don't know if any of the people from the NFU are still here, but that would be fascinating to see what their thoughts are about that as well. I just some of my summer reading was Wilding, which is an absolutely engrossing story of the change to a place called Knepp in Sussex, I think, which has transformed itself to a wild environment. I'm not suggesting that happens to the whole of Shropshire, but it massively changes the carbon capture, and it does a lot of work to improve soil and therefore biodiversity as well. So I'm wondering, you know, where we are with that, and if the team is contributing to the partnership along those lines. And then related to that is, you know, are we talking to the agricultural community about that? Because, you know, Shropshire's role in all of this is going to, you know, whilst we can't really determine what actually happens on farms, we do need to play a leadership role. So I'm wondering if we have sort of lines of communication with farmers, and if we're beginning to promote biodiverse ways of working on in agriculture. Thanks.
Okay.
Would you like to respond? Thank you.
In terms of our support for the climate change action group, a member of the team has actually been seconded full-time into that task group, so we're very much contributing to that work, because absolutely those issues are interlinked. Would I be able to bring Sue Swales in to give you a bit more detail of some of the work? I can't see her on the screen. Is she?
Are you there?
Can you see me now?
Let's see.
Sue Swales, Ecology Team Leader at Shropshire Council. To touch on the point with the Green Infrastructure Strategy, the strategy has been commissioned by our Planning Policy Department to help to underpin some of the new policy wording in the local plan review. So I haven't checked the council's website at the moment, but if you have a look at the policy, or if members of the public want to look at the policy pages and the current consultation out on the local plan review, some of the supporting documents, I suspect the Green Infrastructure Strategy can be found there. It was when I last heard, it was just being finalised, so certainly it's mentioned and addressed in the local plan. I think talking about climate action, Karen's mentioned that a member of our team is part of the climate change team, and yes, we're maintaining those links. But you asked about habitat creation, tree planting, carbon sequestration, and that's very much going to be linked with the other biodiversity things coming up. For protecting biodiversity. I think Karen mentioned the Environment Bill that's coming up, and we've mentioned at the bottom of the report about future opportunities and challenges coming up through that. One of those is drawing up a nature recovery network, which will identify where we have really good habitat at the moment, including wetlands and woodlands, and where we need to target restoration efforts to increase the amount of those habitats, as well as other habitats like your species-rich grasslands and all those others. So they are very much interlinked. The climate change affects biodiversity and vice versa, and we are addressing that. The Nature Recovery Network will be mandatory via the Environment Bill. We currently have an ecological and environmental network that is already covered by planning policy. That will be updated, and a much better restoration layer will be put on top of that, so we can target where to do the habitat creation. And there are very strong links with planning here, because there will be a mandatory biodiversity net gain from development coming in, and that net gain will be targeted at these restorations in the Nature Recovery Network. So there is a lot of new work to be done by the council and with partners. We're currently working on this with other partners like Natural England, Shropshire Wildlife Trust, the Geological Society and so on. So yes, we are moving forward, and we are keeping in contact with our team member in climate change to work together. Has that covered? You also mentioned, sorry, that the agricultural community, and on a range of issues we have been talking with the NFU, and with the habitat creation that's coming up, the partners all working on the Nature Recovery Network, some of those like the Shropshire Wildlife Trust are working with farmers now to get habitat in, particularly linked with district licensing for great crested newts, where they're putting in new ponds paid for via development as part of the new strategic way of dealing with great crested newts on development sites, for instance. So we're beginning to build up momentum to try and address what will be coming forward within the bill, and also cope with our own targets for climate change and biodiversity.
Julian, do you want a follow-up question? I think you've got it.
Very briefly, and this is now just coming to a specific item. So there's an area called, which people know as Rad Valley or Kingsland Valley, between Longden Road and Kingsland in Shrewsbury, which has had a number of planning permission requests, all of which have been turned down, and it's one of those spots which people value massively in terms of its biodiversity, and it's part of a natural green corridor, and it just raises for me the prospect of, what can we do about those bits of land which are threatened somewhat by planning, and is there a way of beginning to think, I realise Shropshire Council is skint, but are there ways of perhaps through public subscription or some sort of schemes beginning to bring some of that land into community ownership or public ownership, so that we can really make the best of it? Are there any opportunities there really to really do our best to protect some of those sort of spots? And that's a question to any of the officers, really.
I can respond a little to that. I think this is very much a planning issue as well as a biodiversity issue. When planning applications come in for those areas, that, like the one you've mentioned, where it's in a corridor or part of the environmental network, policy CS17 comes in, and when we're looking at biodiversity, we clearly, if it's in a corridor and the development would constrict or adversely affect the corridor, we make recommendations to planning to flag up the issues and to flag up what would be lost and gained by what's going on there. And we negotiate also with any applicants in terms, if it is possible to have development and the network, to get enhancements of that network. But there are some key areas that are very good bits of connecting habitat, and we can only use or apply the legislation and the both national and local planning policy when addressing those the planning applications that come in. So we do flag it up, but sometimes we are limited in what we can do, and I'm not sure whether Ian Kilby is still here, but certainly it's a planning issue very much.
Okay, thank you. Are you there, Ian?
Yes, Chair, it's Ian Kilby, Head of Planning Services. Thank you for that. Councillor Dean has raised this specific issue, and I do understand his concerns. This is a very sort of highly sort of valued, sort of semi-naturalised sort of environment running through the heart of the town, and a number of these spaces have been brought into or historically are in public ownership, much of it now in the hands of the town council. Claire Featherstone may comment further on that following me. But through the planning process, Sue Swales quite rightly sort of highlights the relevant policies. That has to be our first point. And the planning officer, in considering any planning application, has to have regard to that first and foremost. And there's a question sometimes of balancing the relative importance of different competing interests. So a developer might say, well, you need to provide housing. There's a very strong housing need across the country. And others will quite rightly point out the ecological biodiversity or landscape value of that a site contributes. It's the planning authority's job to weigh up those sometimes different and disparate sort of material considerations in reaching a decision. So what, again, as I said in relation to a previous point, the community can assist, the town council can assist, the local member can assist here by pointing out where an area is highly valued. The technical consultee, Sue Swales and Karen's team, can respond to the technical value of a place in terms of its species value, or the connectivity point that Sue mentioned, which is sometimes overlooked. I mean, these are wildlife corridors after all. So if a development is seen to interrupt that, then that is clearly a sort of a consideration that the planning officers can take into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Claire, you wanted to add to that answer, I think, about the council-owned parks and sites in terms of biodiversity. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. But on that specific question about the ground in Shrewsbury, I think the town council is probably better placed than us in some respects, because they are managing the publicly owned green space in Shrewsbury, generally speaking. In terms of who owns it at the moment, Julian?
Thanks. I think it's privately owned, and so the applications have come from landowners.
Right. I mean, one of the things we manage 25 different country parks and heritage sites across Shropshire that are either owned or managed by Shropshire Council. There is a paper going to Cabinet in October for 4 more of the local nature reserves. Now, local nature reserves can only, the designation can only apply, I believe, if there is a local authority, whether that's a parish council or a town council or a local authority owning that piece of land. But it does offer a level of protection. Similarly, if it was of special scientific interest, for example, there could be, a designation that perhaps could apply, but obviously the owners would have to be in agreement that that was appropriate, and if they're trying to get planning permission, the chances are they won't want to do that. Just in terms of more generally in terms of biodiversity, with the council-owned sites, we have 2 special areas of conservation, a Ramsar site, those are of European and international importance, 4 SSSIs and 5 current local nature reserves, all of which are managed with biodiversity in mind. And there is countryside stewardship agreements on some of those areas. So in terms of some of the really key natural heritage sites in Shropshire, they are already under council ownership and management and are managed for biodiversity purposes. Just to make that point, really.
Okay, thank you very much. We now have Andy Boddington. Andy? Are you there, Andy?
I am here. My apologies.
That's fine.
Yeah. Most of the points that I was going to raise have sort of been covered in one way or another in the discussion. However, I think when we put biodiversity on the work programme, I think we thought it would be a bit of a journey, and I think we need that journey and to do some more. In particular, given the local plan review and everything that's happening in planning at the moment nationwide, looking at biodiversity net gain is quite important, because just how is it going to be implemented? And it's all very well saying there will be net gain, but how is this measured? What are the metrics? Are we having greening factors like they have in London, which is very mechanical? And looking at the processes of that are really important, because we will see more development, notwithstanding current government proposals, just in our own local proposals. We will still see a lot more development, and we need to promote biodiversity from the outset and get that right. So I think that would be an appropriate topic, if Ian would agree and you would agree, to come back to a future meeting.
Absolutely, I'm very happy to do that, thank you. Robert Newbury, NFU, you wanted to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add really that we are actively engaged with the council on this, and it's one of the regular points that comes up, particularly in relation to planning applications in our liaison group meetings. So we're keen to maintain that dialogue, and also we're working with DEFRA at the moment at a national level on the future ELMS scheme. So, you know, alongside the Environment Bill, we've got the Agriculture Bill, and part of that is designing a policy framework to protect and enhance, to allow us to produce food efficiently, but also whilst protecting and enhancing the environment. And we've got, you know, various proposals we're putting to DEFRA at the moment about schemes which farmers are likely to actually engage with. You know, it's worth noting that 70% of farmland in the UK, or in England, is in environmental schemes. So farmers have taken active and proactive measures to improve biodiversity or improve the environment on their farms. And I'm sure with the right schemes in place, the uptake of such schemes will increase, and we're actively engaged with DEFRA on that. So we're happy to continue talking to colleagues and officers in the council, and also we'll be working on that at a national level. We'll be promoting those schemes when they come forward to our members.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any points that officers wish to clarify? We have no other questions. Do you want to clarify anything, officers? No, Claire? Sue?
Not from me, thank you.
No, okay. We don't actually have recommendations on this one. It's just really to note it. But Andy, is there anything you would like to see as a recommendation on this item? You can see the recommendation in front of you. Committee considers and comments on regulatory services approach to conserving and protecting biodiversity. Andy?
I don't think we need a specific recommendation if we just agree that it continues on the work plan.
Okay, well, that's fine, and it will be included on the work plan, I'll make sure. Is everybody happy with that? I don't think I need to take a vote on that, because I don't think it's really a recommendation to vote on. Is that all right, Daniel? Do you feel we need a vote on this? Daniel? We seem to have lost Daniel. I don't think we need to vote on this, so we'll move on to the next item, if I can, which is the work programme, future work programme. Does everybody have it in front of them? Is everybody happy with the work programme?
Hello, Chair. I'm here, by the way. My apologies.
It's all right. I thought you'd gone for your lunch.
No.
I don't think we needed to vote on the last.
No, if you just wish to know the report, I didn't hear any sort of dissent otherwise, so I think that's fine to go ahead.
Yes, and we'll keep it on the agenda for further meeting. Okay, so if we look at the work programme, is there anything anybody wants to pick up on that? Do you want to lead on it, Daniel, or shall I just take it as it is?
No, I think it is as it is. To be quite honest, we've proposed it as a draft. I invite any comment from the members for any changes or additions that they wish to make to it.
Does anybody want to make any additions to the work programme? Is there anything you think we should be discussing that's not on there that's of importance?
Yes, please, Joyce.
Yes.
It's Dan Morris speaking.
Yes, Dan.
I'd like to see on the work programme at some stage an examination into the effectiveness of the customer service part of the highways reporting system. I'd throw that open for debate and discussion, please.
I don't think you need to debate that. I think you'll have everyone agreeing with you on that one, Dan. But I will go down the list and ask. Are you happy for that to be put on the work programme, Andy? Andy?
Apologies, I'm having some network problems. And I missed that point.
Did you hear what Dan suggested?
Chair.
No, I apologise.
No, Dan thinks we need to look at customer services and basically the way we respond to customer complaints and issues.
Chair, I think this is actually already in the work programme on the 28th of January. We're looking at communicating highways repairs, and I think customer service was very much an integral part of that. So happy to say that we can look at that in January, if that's okay with the committee.
Are you happy with that, Dan? Or do you feel it needs to be looked at sooner?
I mean, as soon as possible, Joyce. Really, but I'm happy to go along with what Daniel suggests. But I think certainly before the end of the sort of financial year next year would be good.
Okay, then. Thank you for that. Then. Okay, is everybody happy with the work programme? Otherwise, if I can have a vote on that, Andy, are you happy with the work programme?
Yes.
Julian, are you happy with that?
Yes, I think I am. Thank you.
Rob Gittins?
Yes, I'm happy.
Paul Milner?
Yes, definitely, yes.
Dan Morris?
Yes, I'm happy, thanks.
Pam Mosley?
Yes, thank you.
Nick Bardsley?
Chair, I did ask if I could speak, actually.
Oh, so sorry. Yes, please.
It was only a very small point. It seems to me that the development of the shopping centres is a pretty significant item for all councillors. I'm a bit disappointed to see that it's just going to be a verbal update. I would have thought between now and the beginning of November there was time for the Director of Place to prepare a written report.
Right, okay. Mark, would you respond to that? Mark? Is Mark Barrows still there?
Mark had to leave, I'm afraid.
Okay, then. I think you're correct, actually, Nick. I think we've had an awful lot of verbal reports on it. So if we could ask Mark, could we have a written report? I'd be very grateful. I think we all would, wouldn't we? Thank you. Good point there raised. I think I do need to ask a question. Oh, Paul, I didn't ask you. Are you happy for the work programme to stay as it is?
I nearly broke down then because I thought you forgot about me, Joyce.
No,
yes,
I've never forgotten.
Happy.
Okay. And I hate to go back, but something I realised, the recommendations on the previous item, I do think we need, as a council, to update our code of practice with the farming community, because county council days are a long time off. I don't know if we need to put that in the recommendation or if we can just ask for it to be updated. Any thoughts, Daniel?
You can certainly. I don't think you need the committee permission on that, so I don't think you need to put it to a vote. I think you're perfectly within your rights to request that as chair of this committee.
Okay, then, well, can we put that as a request then, and if we can put that in writing, that'd be really good. So, yeah, recommendations on this one: agree the proposed committee work programme attached. Note the current task and finish groups attached as Appendix 2. Suggest changes to the committee work programme and recommend other topics. And we've all agreed that. So thank you very much. I don't think we need to count votes, and that's obviously carried. And I think that is the end of the meeting. Have we a date for the next meeting? We have somewhere, haven't we?
Joyce, have you got it to hand, Joyce, so I can do
10 AM, 5th of November 2020. Hopefully there'll be no fireworks. Okay. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for taking part in the meeting. It's been very, very interesting, and I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.